Welcome to another episode of Courageous Me. And I'm really excited. I think I'm always excited because some of the guests are amazing. This one is absolutely phenomenal. So I met her recently at an event and I was actually speaking at the event, but she hung around at the end, I reckon for about an hour and a half. And we just chatted. So we have since caught up. Her name is Lauren Munday. And she's the founder of a company called Think Set Go, which I'll get her to explain. But I've got to share this before we get into it, Lauren. So I just said to her before we went live, if I had to give you a title, what title would you want? And Lauren said, what, like as in Miss or Mrs.? Because she's an ex-school teacher. And I thought that is priceless because that didn't even cross my mind. However, I guess, would you have been Mrs. Monday at school? So you're probably used to it. Anyway, Lauren, before we get to know a bit more about you and everyone else can see how amazing you are, as I already have seen, could you just tell me what excites you to have a conversation with me today around courage?
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Kim. I I really wanted to when you asked me to be on this podcast, I thought what an opportunity to share what I've always thought. Well, actually, it's not what I've always thought. It's what I've started to think as I've started to delve more into all of this. But what excites me about courage is that we kind of don't know that we're not being courageous till we think about it. So what you've done is you've made me think about it, and then it makes me realize where I have and where I am not being courageous. So I, I'm just excited to look at how I can be more courageous by talking to you, and then try and maybe inspire some other people to be courageous too. So it's just awareness, really.
And it's not easy to jump on a podcast if it's not something that you do every day or you do regularly. So even that in itself takes courage. I actually had one guest who said to me at the end, I didn't think talking about courage could be so exciting.
Yeah.
And you're so much in it. So where is a time in your life, and also I want to know a bit about you, but where is a time when you had to really go back and find some courage, given that, it's probably been front of mind in the lead up to today? Where is the moment? And I don't mind how far back you go, and then we'll find out a bit more about you and who you are.
Yeah, so I I will start with most recently. I've had two children, and through that time, well, the first one was just like mayhem. I was just trying to figure out how my life had just turned into something that I couldn't even imagined, just in terms of a bit of chaos mixed with like this new person in my life. But the courage then to just count on ourselves, rely on my husband and I just being reliant on ourselves that we can do this. That was where I felt courage. But then from that, I had my second child and decided that I wouldn't go back to my teaching role at that time, and instead try and build a business that looks more at an area, a subject that isn't taught at school, and one that I'm really passionate about. So it's been a really big, scary time of thinking, I love teaching, I love it, and I loved the school I was at. But do I step out of it to do this other thing? Like, I've had this break in my life. Is this the time that I go off and try something new? Sometimes when I've just been doing the same thing all the time, I don't have that break to allow me to reset. But I had that break with my second child. It was maternity leave again, and I was like, okay, here we go. What are we going to do? And I feel like I'm still in that journey. I'm building that business, which is called Think Set Go, and it's bringing workshops and presentations to students and athletes and people who have goals and they want to pursue a goal. And I'm still figuring out if this is where I want to take this. And whilst I love teaching, I feel that I'm getting a lot out of this that I never thought I needed. So I'm continuing this journey, even though it is a risk. It's a financial risk. It's I had security in a job, and I'm leaving that to go and do this potentially. So yes, it's all a lot of courage is definitely one of the key words that is on my mind at the moment.
And what I find so gorgeous about this is you said I had a break, which was actually maternity leave for a second child,
Yeah.
which is not actually a break. I guess it's a break from routine. It's so funny when someone says, "Oh, was it a lovely time maternity leave?" I said, "Yeah, it was lovely, but it certainly wasn't a break." But at the same time as doing that, and it is hard work, especially when you're bringing a second child into the mix, that you also decided to leave what you knew, which was being a teacher. And were you Mrs. Munday? I have to confirm that.
Yeah, well, that's my maiden name. So I was Miss Monday, and my married name is Walker, but I'm just keeping Monday for work. So Miss Monday.
Miss
And that
Munday
was,
and then Mrs. Walker.
yeah, well,
Oh, cool.
I keep Mrs. Walker for my personal life and Miss Monday for my school life.
Oh, got it. Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Awesome. But you go and do all of this and decide to start this new business when you're on a break having your second child.
Yes. Yeah, because
Right.
the thing is, like, I feel like the first maternity leave, I could just get my head around what I was, how our life had changed. The second maternity leave, I was ready to go. I don't know. I can't explain it. I knew what I wanted to do. And I would sit here in this room actually, and I would be breastfeeding, and I'd just be like visualizing, and I have this wall, and I'd just be like visualizing everything, how this business is going to run and what I want to do and the point of it and how it's going to help. And I just made this whole idea while I was looking after a child. I don't know. That's just how my brain was working.
I love though, because for you, this felt right. Like it probably didn't even, I mean, yes, I'm sure there was courage that came into it. And anyone else listening would think fruitcakes. You've got a second child and you've quit your job and you've started a business based on something that was just in your mind. Like it wasn't like you were even leaving teaching to go and get another job. You were leaving teaching to start a business that you hadn't done before. Now, you mentioned that it was because of something that they don't teach at schools that you wanted to bring in. Tell me about that. What's that about?
Yes. So I'm a PE and health teacher, and I love that content. But the one thing that I think helps people across any avenue is the mindset. And I was seeing a lot of students who would sit out in PE, or PE was used as an outlet, and then they wouldn't necessarily contributing other classes, and they might have trouble at lunchtime, and then they go back into the classroom and they can't concentrate, or they just don't like the subject, so they don't see the point in being at school, so they don't want to do it. They don't want to study, they don't want to learn. But it's like, it's all a mindset. And what I started to think was, why aren't we teaching mindset skills? Because then it will translate to any subject and any facet of life. Plus, a lot of what I was learning about, I've been doing a lot of study into this, and a lot of people say, I have all this knowledge now because I was doing self-development, but they didn't teach it in school. You know, it's not something they taught in school. They should have taught it in school. Well, here I am thinking, I'll teach it in school then. And then people can't have that excuse. But the thing is that a lot of young people don't have their brains aren't fully formed, so they're not able to make decisions clearly. But what I just want to do is just lay out some self-development information that they can utilize or not utilize, and hopefully it will resonate with some students. And Think, Set, Go is designed so that if you're an athlete, you can also take this on board. If you're anyone with any goal, you can also take this on board, and it will just help you to pursue goals and look at, okay, so I don't like what I'm doing at training. I don't like what I'm doing at school. I don't like how what my parents are saying or what my partner is saying, but can I use any of this to fuel me later? Or can I use any of this as motivation? And then we can continue to pursue goals. We just got to flip the way we think about things and change our perspective.
And goal setting in itself, like there's so many benefits if it's done right. But I know so many humans, as you would too, that setting goals sounds easy. You can do it, but it actually doesn't get the results that you intended to do it. So
Yeah.
just back on that. And I love what you said about, especially those in sport. Did you play sport or were you an athlete? So let's delve into that. So how did you, like, why were you a sports teacher and how does sport play out in your life?
Yeah, so I've always loved sport. I spoke to my mum the other day, and she was explaining some key things about her kids, and the one thing she said to me was I was competitive. So I have got a competitive nature, and I think I used sport to get that out. And I would always compete with my older brother as well. And so I grew up just doing all the sports, not anything in particular. Netball was my favorite, and dancing. And then once I got a bit older, surfing and life saving, and I also did basketball in there. And then what was most interesting So now I run. That's my thing. That clears my mind. I've learned how to rebuild that up after kids, and having fun runs or little events that I can go to kind of fuel that motivation. But the one thing that really triggered Think Set Go to take place was when women's AFL started in 2017. I thought, let's go. Let's just see if I can I used to go to the gym a lot, so I was fit, but I had no football skills. But I thought, let's just go hard and see how far we can go. So I loved testing that theory of if you put your mind to it, you can achieve anything. And I don't even know if that's true, because I don't think you can achieve anything. Like, obviously you have limits based on, I can't be an Olympic gymnast because I'm 36 years old and I'm not a gymnast. So it depends on what your goal is. It has to be clear and specific to you and something you can achieve. So I agree with that. But what I did was I thought, okay, football started AFL level. Let's see if I can get as high as I can. And then I was strategic about it. I went to clubs that had VFL pathway, and I trained as hard as I could. I showed off my strength, which was my fitness. And then I just developed my skills outside of training as much as I could. And I was 28 at the time, so I didn't have a background in football. I just thought, let's just experiment on myself and see if my mindset stuff is gonna work. And yeah, I found things started coming to me. So this was where I thought it's key. It's like what you think about really does bring things in. You need to go there though. You need to decide. A lot of us have ideas on what we want, but we don't really decide. And once you decide what you want, things will come at you and you'll see opportunities you never saw before. So like, I met people who were wanting to help me, and people I never thought I would have met otherwise. And then I ended up playing VFL for Melbourne Uni and then VFL for Carlton and being vice captain at Carlton. And like, it all happened within a three-year time frame, and it's only because I put all my energy there. I said, this is what I want to do. Let's see if I can do it.
I love that you used yourself almost as an experiment to see if I apply these mindset techniques that I've been studying, that if I apply them to myself to do something I've never done before, which is play football, women's football. And you did it. And I just think there's so much in that you're not just doing it from a theory point of view. You're actually applying in your own world, seeing what works, what doesn't work, how it plays out. And then you became vice captain at Carlton, which I'm a Carlton supporter. So I've got big fangirl on you that you played for Carlton.
Right.
But I love that you did that. And at 28, now I know that for any of us who are over 28, like myself, 28 sounds like it's really young, but I know that for playing the game of football, 28 is not actually young. A lot of the top football players retire sort of by the time they get to that age. So you're starting your football career at an age when so many are leaving. So when you say it's about like putting your mind to it, tell me about that, because I know there's probably plenty of people listening that go, yeah, but I've tried to put my mind to something before and it hasn't worked or turned into something like what you did. What are people doing wrong in your view when it comes to the mindset piece around doing what you want?
So it's a conscious decision. I think we sometimes think that things will take care of themselves by putting it out there, which I understand, manifestation, you put it out there, it will come to you. But this is why I think Set Go is the structure I like to use, because think about it. Think, why do I want it? And have really strong purpose behind it. Set it up so that you can actually continue to pursue it when it gets hard, because that's pretty much the downfall, is it's going to get hard. Please, when I say I played VFL level and I made that sound really quite easy to get there, and same with starting business with children, it has been so hard. Both of those things were so hard. Like, there has been so many tears and so many battles with my own mindset and like just the resilience to keep going. But it's because I had to think right, because I know I've got to raise my kids and I'm really passionate about my business. Both of those things I love. So I'm going to make it work. And same with the football. I just really wanted to test and see if this theory was true. So I had to, every time something would come up that would deter me, I had to just go back to my think, okay, but what am I doing it for? So often we lose touch why we do things, and then it's of course it's easy to say it's not working out, we don't want to do it anymore, but you've lost focus on the main point. And then just setting it up so it's doable in your life. Also, not worrying about the time frame. I think sometimes we try to do things too much too soon. One thing I've been learning at the moment is why when I feel overwhelmed, one, it's probably I need more sleep. Sleep is such a driver for my mindset and the way I think. Two, hydration. I can't say how important hydration is just to like help with the way that our brain is able to function. And three is the physical activity for me. If I feel like I'm feeling overwhelmed or overthinking things, for me it's physical activity. It's changing my state, my physical state changes my mind state. So that's how it works for me. And then the go is actually doing the thing that needs to be done. It's like, I want to go to the gym, but I wake up in the morning and I'm just not feeling it. But I have to go because this is about self-discipline, and having that self-discipline is what gets us to pursue our goals. And one day we don't feel like doing that certain thing, the next day we do. And that's why it's important to just keep chipping away, unless the things changes, unless the purpose changes. If we're not interested in that goal anymore, that's fine too.
Do you think that's a reason why people set goals? And I was listening to this the other day too, that if you set goals and they're not high up on your priority list of what's really important and your fundamental values, then it's going to make it a huge challenge all the time because it's not important and that purpose or that why is not great enough. Do you think that really does play out in everything that you've seen?
Yes, and this is why knowing yourself is the first step. Like, I didn't just jump into think, set, go, starting this business because I just thought it would be cool or I wanted to start a business. Like, I thought back to when I was a kid and I thought back to what people said I was good at back then, because I was thinking, I like all of this. And I remembered people saying, oh, you're really good at helping me. Like, you've helped me change the way I'm thinking. And I remembered all that. I consciously decided, what have people said I'm good at? What do I think I'm good at? And what am I interested in? Because if you're interested in it and you feel like you could do it forever, it's kind of something that you should pursue. I think it's really important to trial different things though, not just stick to one thing at first, because we obviously find out things about ourselves by trialing new things. But once you have that little thing inside you that is like bubbling away, you just got to go for it in some way and just chip away, and that will build momentum. And if it's a really, really big goal and it doesn't really resonate with you anymore, let it go. Like, life's too short to just keep holding on to things that aren't relevant anymore.
That's such a good one because I know and the whole sunk cost fallacy, which is a behavioral science term. But I've invested so much time and effort and energy into this. I can't just let it go. I get this all the time, especially with businesses that are no longer fulfilling someone or a career that is like, but I've done it for 20 years. I can't just let all those skills go to waste. What's been your experience where you've had to let something go? And it might have even been when you were a kid, but where you started to see the impact of, yes, you've invested all this time, effort, energy, resources, whatever it might be, into doing it, but letting it go was actually the right decision. Can you give us an example where that's played out?
Oh, lots of times, all the time. Like, there's big things like that football journey, for example. I didn't get to the AFL level like I was planning on, but I have to emphasize that at that higher level, the pressure that I felt wasn't worth the pressure I put on myself. I was sitting in these auditoriums and I was hearing from the coaches and I was hearing all of these different things I had to do, but I couldn't get my head right. I couldn't get my mindset into the zone to really take it on. I was just worried about something that happened in the last game or something that might happen in the future. And because I wasn't in the moment just taking it in, I didn't have those mindset skills. That's when I was sitting there thinking, mindset needs to be at the top of the agenda. Like, this needs to be in every facet of people's life because it will change the way they move through life. And so I What was your question again?
Where you've had to let something go that you've invested time and
Yeah.
effort into.
So then I got injured really badly, and I won't lie, I was actually partly relieved. Like, even though I had this big goal, getting injured made me step away and realize all that pressure and stress was not good for my mental health. And again, this is why I've started Things That Go, because I want that not to be what people go through. I want people to be able to pursue goals with strong mental health. And so because I didn't have that, I was actually relieved when I was forced to step away and I could reassess my life. Luckily for me, also lockdown happened, COVID lockdown. So there was no football, and it was a perfect time for me to have kids and start a family. So I went from football, trying my best to get as high as I could, to getting injured, to reassessing and being like, actually, I don't think I want that anymore. And then I put another goal in place. So as long as I think goals are essential to keep us feeling like we have a fulfilled life, but if they're getting us down, we need to reassess.
But isn't that interesting that you obviously went into the football one partly as an experiment to test some of the theories that you were trying to develop at that time around mindset. You're getting in there, you're playing at a really high level, and you're noticing that your mindset is not right. And of course, not having, brought Things That Go to the world at this point. And yet there was a relief, because I reckon there's so many people out there that still continue on because they feel and associate, and I know this firsthand, they feel and associate shame or failure with not continuing to pursue it, whereas an injury was almost like it got you off the hook. So
Yeah,
you didn't have to do it. How does that play out?
Yeah, 100%. So I guess that's like teaching for me. To not teach anymore. There's this big thing going on with teaching where a lot of teachers are stepping away from the profession and they're unhappy and they don't have good well-being. And I understand that, and I can completely see that that is the case. But for me, it's actually not. I felt good as a teacher. I like being a teacher. I'm doing this. I think people need to realize that when you're 80 and you look back at your life, it's okay to have lots of things that you did. And actually, it's kind of cool. It's kind of better to look that way and be like, awesome, look what I did. Like, I really tried to milk it. I tried to get as much out of it as I could. And when I had a hunch, I followed it, and I wasn't too scared about what others think. I think judgment, if we can let go of that, will open up your world. And that's something I'm realizing. And if I feel that I'm getting too attached to, say, social media or LinkedIn or something that I'm working on a lot, and I'm looking at a lot, even the TV, even the news, all that is filtering into our mind external thoughts and external opinions, and we're making it up a lot of the time. And some of the interesting theory that I've been looking at is the idea that we have 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day, and 90% of those are the same we had yesterday. So we are going to keep thinking the same thoughts and feeling the same way, therefore doing the same thing day after day, unless we consciously go in there, become self-aware and change something. And for me, that's not watching the news anymore. I got really into watching a lot of the stuff on the war, and when all these things were happening in Ukraine and different places in the world, and it would really affect me. I found it affecting me through the day. And if I watch the news, it's like a real life horror movie, because it's all real and it's all drama and it's stressful, and all that stress is external, but I'm bringing it internally, and so do we all, without us realizing it. Even having it on the background, it increases our stress levels. And when our stress levels are increased, we can't think clearly. We're taking on too much external input. And two, stress is one of the biggest causes of disease and all of those illnesses. And so none of that's any good for us. So I'm not saying don't watch the news and don't talk to people and get advice. And it's just so important what we take in, because it affects us without us realizing it.
Oh, it's so true. I reckon I gave up the news 18 months ago.
Yeah.
And honestly, I am so much happier because I often get the question, but don't you feel that you're missing out on what's going on? It's like, no, no, no. You still are up to date with what's
Yeah.
going on just by virtue of, being out and
Yeah.
about and here. Plus, I've got a husband who I always say to him, if there's anything I absolutely need to know when I
Yes.
walk out that door in the morning, can you just please tell me?
Yes.
And it's completely, I notice such a massive difference to my inner state by not having a lot of that negativity, because if there's something going on the other side of the world, it's sad, right? And it does make you sad, but it doesn't affect me directly, and there's nothing that I can do about it to help. But all it's doing is creating that extra sadness,
Yeah.
which, the stuff going on in my own world's got enough that it needs my attention for without all this other stuff coming in. So with all of this, you mentioned a little while back that when you were a little girl, you were going back and reflecting on what your strengths were, and that people were noticing that you would help them through things.
Yeah.
How did that play out? Because it's really fascinating that you've ended up in this path, and it almost feels like this is where you were meant to go. But where did that first start sort of playing out when you were a little girl?
Firstly, I think I just liked to hear people's stories. I like sharing stories and hearing stories. I don't share their stories, but I just like hearing, about people's lives. So I just ask a lot of questions. And then, what's funny? When I was doing all my research around this mental mindset stuff, and remembering I'm not talking about the diagnosed mental health issues. I'm talking about like general coping strategies that everyone just as a human we can benefit from. So when I was doing that kind of research, I went to my nana's house and I saw on her wall all of these books that my grandpa had written when he was alive. He's passed away for many years. And I opened them up and there was like honestly 30 folders of writing, and it's all to do with this kind of philosophical, like that Stoic philosophy kind of mindset stuff that I'm actually learning about, that my grandpa used to write about, and I had no idea. So I don't know if you can have like something passed on through the family that gives you this kind of interest, but it's just interesting that he had that as a hobby. And so just when I just reflect, I don't know, I've spoken to some cousins and they're like, yeah, you used to always say things and it would make us feel really like feel better or think about things in a different way. And that just stuck with me. And I realized I love sitting with the student in the PE class who's not participating and getting down to the nitty gritties of really why they don't want to be there. And, they'll say, oh, because I just don't like this sport, or I don't want to do it, I feel sick. But really, sometimes it could be they had a fight with a friend yesterday and it's still playing on their mind and they just can't get it out of their head. And it's little things like that that I've learned how to talk to these kids, to help them reason with themselves and be like, well, that was yesterday and that was only one little element of my whole life, and not to build things up into bigger than they need to be. So I'm kind of utilizing, what I did as a kid, and then what my grandpa, I've read a lot of his work and I love it. It's all similar to what I'm doing. And then translating that when I do teaching. So I still teach, I do CRT. And that's one of the hardest parts of teaching because I don't have relationships with these kids. I'm just coming in and being their random teacher for a day. And some of them just love it and just like go hard at it, really trying to push me. And others just don't do their work, but others just do their work. Everyone's different. So I'm really learning to go into different schools and now translate this information I'm learning that I really thought initially would be for adults. This is now being taught to students. And from what I've done over my whole life, I'm trying to help young people. And I'm remembering what it was like to be a student. I'm remembering what it was like to be a teenager. I'm trying to put myself into their shoes so I can resonate and not feel too old. I just want to make sure that I'm getting through to them. So that's why I like reflecting on what it was like for me as a child.
I think that's so important too. And what I loved what you said before, and I'd love to explore this more too, is that when it came to the mindset and just say, you know, back to you even playing football, or maybe this child that doesn't want to play sport, and it's actually because something happened yesterday that's affecting them today. And of course, children don't have that level of awareness to think, oh, maybe that thing then is affecting this decision now. But you were saying before that just say you had a bad game, or you had a game where you didn't perform, or you, I don't know, dropped the ball or didn't do something, that would like almost like a hangover. It would carry over into, say, the next training or the next game. And I know I started women's baseball at 48. And I remember in my first season that there are a number of times where I'd make a play and fudged it, which happened a lot, but I wouldn't let it go. And then, you know, I'd berate myself, and then I'd spend the next week until we played again being really grumpy with myself. And how could you do that, Kim? You know better. Or, you know, and then I would overtrain because I thought, okay, well, that's because, you know, I'm not good at ground balls, for example. So I just do ground balls after ground balls after ground balls. And I would beat myself up, which meant that my performance, I wasn't then in the new game. I was still hung up. How do you get around that? Because you said that played out even with you. And I don't, and this is life too. This is not, yes, we're talking sport, but this is in life. You get one thing that disheartens you or discourages you, and we don't let it go, and it affects us. How can you, what's your sort of take on all this?
Yeah, for sure. It's so common. It happens every day. I think we need to isolate the incident. So we need to, instead of, have you heard of analysis paralysis, where
Mm-hmm. Yep.
you just get paralyzed by worrying about that one thing? We need to isolate that and say that is one thing that sure didn't go how we wanted it to. But this is where it's all mental. And this is where people who are performing how they want to be performing, they also have things going wrong, but they don't let it impact the other things. So I would say now, if this was happening to me, I would try to write down the incident, like physically. This writing things down physically, it enacts different neurological pathways to speaking and to typing. So writing is really important. We use like, I think it's 10,000 different muscles when we write, as opposed to 1 or 3 when we type. So it's very important that we write when we can. And what that does is it keeps the problem there, but not in our mind. It puts it onto paper. It helps us sleep because it's still there, but it's not going around in here. We're not trying to remember it. It's somewhere else. And it distances us. So something I was learning about is when terrorists are being analyzed and talked to, they take away 2 things in order to interrogate them. They take away their space, so they make it very small when they're interrogating a terrorist. And they also take away time, so they don't know what time it is. They don't know. They do things very quickly in their face, very quickly. So then if we want to increase relaxation and increase the space between a problem, we want to increase time and increase distance. So we want to try to separate ourselves from that thing we're worrying about, and we want to give ourselves more time before we react. So I think that's probably one thing I would have done, is when I was going through all of this myself, is not go so hard at myself about it, separate it, write it down, move it away, and then come back to it later when I'm in a different headspace. Because emotion is just, when that drives how we feel, it drives what we do. And so to come back to that problem in a different headspace will change what we do, and it will make it not feel so big. So I would say, yeah, it's just trying to get separation and give yourself time.
Oh, that's really interesting because, I mean, obviously I understand all the benefits of writing things down, and in particular, those things that go round and round and round in your head, you know, at 2:00 in the morning that, oh, I didn't do this, I didn't do that. Like if you can get them out, that stops that kind of overthinking. I've never thought about it though in the context of what you've just said, that if something's gone wrong, or even if it is like I dropped a ball, or instead of berating myself, to write it down and almost physically push it out of the way and then step away from it, and maybe then come back to it. Okay, I did that then. So what could I do next time that was different, but allowing it, getting it out of my body, so the space,
Yeah.
and walking away from it. That's really interesting. And it's so funny, isn't it? It sounds so simple. We're just talking about it, but I could understand the power that that would have
Yeah.
to someone in
Just
the moment.
It weakens it. So
Yeah.
when we let ourselves keep going over it, is strengthening it. And the idea is we want to weaken it. We want to try and distance ourselves and put it into perspective of our whole life. And the only way to really do that sometimes is to take yourself away. Like, that's why I run. I run. It's the best mental medicine for me. And if you can find that thing that you do, whether it's like playing with your kids or going for a walk or, I don't know, reading a book, you separate yourself and then come back when you're in a different headspace. And just on running, one of the biggest things I found in terms of changing my physicality is when I run, if I've got something really bad, like really bugging me, I will find a space where I can sprint. And my sprinting is not really fast. It's just faster than I would have ran. And I kind of like let myself go like a dog off a chain and just use 100 meters to just run fast, because that's changing my physiological state, which can change my mental state. And you'll find that too, if there's something you do and it's at a certain pace, pick up the pace or do something erratic. And this is why people say, do crazy dancing for a minute, do something, or listen to different music. Music is essential. It's an external device that will filter through us rather than it coming internally. It's like something external, but it's so powerful. Put a song on intentionally that's going to change your mood. And, this is another thing I talk to students about. The songs you're listening to, they can increase your level of stress. They can increase your level of feeling really down and really, bummed about things, or they can really pump you up. And what we want to do is psych ourselves up, not out. And if we're going to do that, it's got to be conscious. We've got to sometimes put some plans in place. This is the setup phase that I'm talking about. Like, this is when I feel like this, I'll do this. And like with your baseball, you probably had so many training sessions and so many games where things went wrong. You could have said, okay, this is going to happen again and again and again. And when this happens, I will do this. Sometimes we just need to think ahead, have a plan of attack. So it's not, we don't have to think, what are we going to do? We know because it's written there, or it's highlighted. When this happens, I do this. Just like a playbook.
Oh, it's so interesting, because what was happening is my whole second season was a disaster, because I would get up to bat and I would get out, almost guaranteed, because of my mindset. And we had an assistant coach come in one day and he said, what's happening is, because you're so critical of yourself, when you're getting up there to bat, you're thinking about, am I standing the right way? Am I doing this? Am I holding it the right way now? I've got to remember to do this. So I'm almost like assessing, which means I'm not actually in the game. Like, I'm not really watching the ball. He said, what I want you to do from now on is at game day, do all of that assessment and everything when you're training or whatever. On game day, when you're getting up to bat, I want you to think of a song that you love that is uplifting. So I used to think of the song Love Is in the Air, and I want you to have that song playing on full volume in your head. Obviously, people don't need to hear me singing it. And come up to that batting box with that song in your head and just have that there and forget about everything else you've learned and been taught, so that you're in the moment. Your state has changed. And that turned, I'm going to say my career, but my career was just, playing the game. But that turned everything around for me, and it was so small. So what I also used to do is, when I would be driving in the car to game day, I always have podcasts and I'm dosing myself with information. I used to then just play really happy, uplifting music. Changed everything. So, because I was going to say, you've said sprinting helps you increase your state. For those who aren't sprinters, what could they do? And you said dancing, or a crazy erratic dance move, or something else that they could do.
Yeah, and I think we don't have to actually do anything in terms of our physical self. What I'm talking about also is changing our what's coming into our physical body. So it could be light. Light is sometimes underestimated in the way that it can enhance our mood. But one of the main things that is said in science at the moment in terms of sleep, for example, is making sure that we are having natural light exposure first thing in the morning. And something like that is so that it creates alertness. You might have heard of cold water plunging, or, just having a cold shower. All of that increases blood flow so that we can stay alert, and it increases our cognitive awareness, and so that we can concentrate. Now, if you don't feel that you are in a good state of mind, you could try doing those two things, getting more natural light and having cold water exposure, which could just be having a shower and turning the cold water on for 30 seconds at the end, even 10 seconds at the end of the shower. And that shift in your physiology, the way that it will shift your physiology, will change the way that you feel mentally. And some of these things might have to be practiced a few times, just like what you were saying about training versus game. Training is what we do when we're preparing for something. This is the time to be failing. This is the time to be honing in on different elements. But when we're performing, we want it to be in that natural flow state as much as possible, where we just go with it. And so you need to have times where you're training in life and times when you're performing in life. But the only way to perform at our best is to train properly. And this is why doing these little tiny routines and just getting these new routines into our life, which will become habits because we'll naturally want to do them, will help us perform. So it will help all of those times when we feel down. We'll have all these strategies in place, and we've practiced them when we're relaxed. If we practice these things when we're not under stress, it will be easier to implement them when we are under stress. So this is another one with the athletes, but also in life. Gradually increase pressure where you can, but when you're in a state of control, so that when you're in a state where you're out of control, these strategies are naturally at the forefront of your mind, and you can implement them quicker than you would have otherwise.
Yeah, I love that. I just think there's so much in that. And a couple of things on that, just going back before about even just doing an activity that's different. There's all this research that's been done around the value of hobbies, and that hobbies aren't just a nice to have, they're actually a necessity to help you with your performance because of the distraction, and that our brains crave novelty and nourishment.
Yeah.
And obviously nourishment, not just in terms of, sleep and hydration and obviously food, but what we're putting into them. This goes back to why the news is not necessarily, it's not very nourishing more often than not, but also novelty. And that's where hobbies come into it, with the whole novelty, the different, something, and creating those new neural pathways. I think all of that part's really fascinating. One of the other areas that I love, and I know you and I have talked about this before, is the go bit, like the just take action. And can I just get you to share how you accidentally wrote a book?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And why I want you to share this is it's the go bit for me that I know a lot of people get stuck on. And in my world and the work I do, I call it, having the courageous action. Like you've got to actually do the thing. You can't just think about it or have done the work and don't put it out there. Like Seth Godin talks about, you've got to ship it, right? Which means you've got to push send on the email for it to get out into the world. Just having written it's not enough. Can you talk about how that played out in your life, but with the learning around the goal at the same time?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, the go is probably one of the hardest parts. You can think things through and plan them all you like, but doing it is a whole nother ball game. And but the problem is it's the most essential. So this is the most important part. And you know what? If you think of things as exciting, they will be. And it's like a conscious thing. If you say to yourself, like, let's just try things, let's just go and see, let's just see. If you say it to yourself, like, let's just see what happens, it kind of takes the pressure off that it has to go well. And so what I did when I said I had my second child, and I was like thinking about this whole business concept and what I want to be sharing, I started to write it down, and I wrote it so that I didn't really like reading when I was a young person. So I read more now, but I thought I just want to write something that's really easy for me to read, so that when I run workshops, I just pull this page, pull that page, and pull that page, and then I have my content ready to go. And what ended up happening is I wrote about 48 different concepts in a think, set, go structure. in terms of it's a quote or a concept, then it's a story or how this can be set up in someone's life, and then an activity that gets them to go and do the thing. So when I teach this, I get them to do physical things, or like in terms of games, we play a lot of games to get people to feel what it's like to do that thing that they want to do in a safe environment where there's no external judgment. And then I translated that so that it would work as a written activity. So it was think was the concept, set was how it works in terms of putting it into your life or someone else's life, and go was a written activity. And I had all these pages, and I thought, I met a lady who wrote a book, and I just said to her, hey, where'd you get your book published? And she just told me who the publisher was, and I just sent this off, this thing that was meant for me. I sent this off and said, hey, I've got all this, how do you think this would work in terms of a book? And she just said, I've been trying to get in touch with a mindset person to write a book for us. That hasn't been working out. Your manuscript fits really well with what we're trying to do. She said she's from Amber Press, which is a publication company, and she said I have an 8-book series, and we're looking for a mindset book to go with this high school success series, and your content fits really well. Can we use that? And I was just like, wow. Like, of course. And I then just had to like make it make sense for someone else to read, because it wasn't intended for someone else to read. It was intended for me in my workshops. And now I've created this small little easy to read book where every page is a new concept with a new written activity or some ideas on, like I was talking about, with how to change your mood and mindset. And now that's going to be part of this 8-book series for students that gets released in June this year, next term. And yeah, I just can't believe how, again, just do something, because you don't know where it will end up. And we always think we know where things will end up. I think that's what holds people back, but actually we don't know where things will end up. And I think if you just go step by step, it builds momentum, and it builds, therefore, courage. Because when we have those little wins along the way, or we do one thing and then another thing, bang, that's confidence. And when we have confidence, we have courage. So if you're ever like thinking, should I or shouldn't I? Just do it. I'm telling you now, just go for it, because it just might not end up how you thought, but that's not a bad thing sometimes. And if it is a bad thing, then lucky you tried it, because otherwise you would have been worrying about it and wasting all this time. So I hope people can start to just go and do things and just see where things end up, and not try to predict where it will end up, because it's so often great in a different way. Yeah.
And that prediction piece is so true, isn't it? That the expectation you've got is that it's got to look like this. But when you can let that go and detach, and again, putting space between it, almost to go back to your example before, when you can put space and say, look, I'm putting it out there. I don't know what's going to be happening next, but if I don't at least do this, like, so you've accidentally become an author, although you didn't necessarily set out to do that when you were writing. Look what's happened, and look at the impact that you just writing all that content for yourself, it being published, the impact that's going to have on so many others' lives that you could never have necessarily foreseen was going to happen. Like,
Yep.
how cool is that?
And this is where you've got to thank other people, because it's not something we have other people, and I think we forget that. Like, everyone else has these strengths too, and these areas that they're expert in, and you don't have to be the one that does it all. Like you, Kim, having me on this show, I don't have a podcast. I've never been on a podcast, and I've wanted to, but I didn't know who to talk to or like how to go about it. And then I met you, and you have a podcast, and you asked me to come on. Like, it's just crazy if you think about what you want and you start to do little steps and you have conversations with as many people as possible around that, things will come at you, and you just need to go. That's where you just got to like jump on board and just put yourself out there bit by bit. A lot of what I'm doing at the moment is saying, okay, is this helping me or not? Because sometimes if I do too much, I get too overwhelmed, then I can't be present with my kids, for example, and that's not where I want to be either. So it's like really just being aware of how you feel when you do something, getting that intuitive feeling like, does this feel right? Does this feel wrong? Sometimes we need to do things anyway, but But I think it's just important to like look at the bigger picture and be like, have a goal first of all, and then see if things lead to it naturally just by holding that thought in place.
Yeah, and again, it sounds easy when we're talking about it. I know it's not.
Yeah.
Obviously, we've all had times where it hasn't, but there's so much gold in what you're saying around the whole thing set go. But the mindset piece, like that is always, isn't it, like the thing that gets so many people unstuck. Just can I also touch on when it comes to doing all of this, especially the go bit? I know that there's a lot of people that then go, oh yeah, but what if it doesn't work out? What are people going to think? Or what if I put it out there and I'm laughed at or I'm ridiculed, or, the whole judgment and comparison. What's your take on all of that? And what are other people going to think of me? What's your take on that?
So, of course, I feel that all the time as well. And one thing I stop myself. So, first, you have to be aware that that's the thought that's coming into your head and stop it. Basically, like at the end of the day, you got to notice what's coming in. And those thoughts aren't true. Like it's just something you've made up or something that your mind tries to reason with yourself and keep yourself safe. So I understand why we have those thoughts because we're trying to protect ourselves. But we just need to say, okay, that's not the truth. That's just a thought. Let it go. But if it doesn't go, then I think the idea of success leaves tracks. Follow people who've done similar things in terms of learn about what they went through, because no one got anywhere successfully without failures and things that went wrong. And so success leaves tracks is a nice one that I like to think of, because if you just look at other people's journeys, it will make you feel better about the one you're on sometimes. And that goes with mothering, that goes with being a teacher or being in your workplace, and looking at how other people handle things can actually give you tips on how to do it yourself. Because
Totally.
like we can be in the exact same position as someone, but they're handling it differently. So we build things up, but actually there's other ways to handle it. We just have to look for those other ways to handle things, and we might find it takes the pressure off.
Yeah, and I think too, hearing this, I know when I became a mother for the first time, and I was in a mothers group, and what I loved about the mothers group was that I didn't know what I was doing, but I was hearing what others were doing or not doing, or things that they didn't get right, and it normalized it.
Yeah.
It made me go, huh. Okay, because in my head, everybody else was the perfect parent. Every other new mother knew exactly what to do and had it all sorted. But in actual fact, it didn't. And what I'm loving about, and maybe this is just the circles that I'm hanging out in now, is hearing about other people going, yeah, like you said before, that even when you started playing football or when you've started this new business, yeah, it was hard. It wasn't easy because you've made it look easy from the outside. You had your second baby, you started a new business, you decided you wanted to play competitive football, you did. But being able to see that, no, it wasn't. And it was hard. And there were moments when you had the tears and the, what am I doing? I can't do this. And yet you're qualified in this area. For me, it goes, oh, pressure's off a little bit. Come on, Kim, come down. She found it hard. The fact that you're finding it hard too, that's okay.
Well, I think we don't need to why do we think life should be easy? Like it's just a funny thing. Like it's more interesting, it's more exciting when we don't really know what's going on, and it's only in hindsight we sometimes see that. And if I read this thing yesterday about someone, a basketballer, Olympic basketballer, wrote a letter to herself, her 18-year-old self, and that's another cool activity you can do is write a letter to yourself and say, I know you were stressed back then and I know all this stuff went on, but look how it turned out and look how it helped you now, and thank God that happened because of blah blah blah. We can't see when we're in it, but on reflection, you got to go through that hard stuff. You just have to. Like, it's just all part of it. So if you try and avoid it, you'll never do anything.
No, that's right. Exactly. And I always talk about, that in your comfort zone, not much goes on in there. I mean, yes, you can still have a lovely life in there, but if you want more, then you're going to have to start to expand that zone and do things that take you out of it. And when that happens, that's when you get the bubbles in the belly, and the bubbles in the belly mean growth. They mean challenge, and they mean, something bigger and better and all of that. So what's the next thing you've got to really reach in for and find some courage to do at the moment? What's on your horizon?
Yeah, so that's really trying to bring Think Set Go to more people. So I think I'm doing well but really, I'm kind of just doing it in my own little office. I'm not actually confident at sharing it, like say for social media, for example. I get really hesitant about putting myself on video and, what am I going to say though? Like, they don't need to see me. But I think that helps make it more personal. So putting myself out there will help build what I'm trying to do and share what I'm trying to do. And that's definitely something I need to build confidence in by doing bit by bit. And then just branch out, just go for it. Like, just contact people and say, hey, I've got these awesome sessions that could be great for your people, and just see what they say. Don't hold back as much as I am. Yeah.
And by the way, take your own medicine.
Yeah.
Like, isn't this, as you're saying this, I'm thinking this is so beautiful, because this is exactly what the work is that you're doing, especially the go bit is, putting yourself out there and giving it a go. And for you, as you say, doing the videos, spreading the word, then yeah. And Think Set Go is not limited to children. It's not limited to school groups. It's not even limited to sportsmen or sports people or athletes. It's limited to nothing other than anyone who's human.
Yes.
And wants more out of life, right?
Yeah. If you're human, learn about it, because all this stuff is so important. And yes, you're right. Everything I'm doing is really I'm trying to do it to myself, and I'm just trying to share it with others. And I'm always going to be trying to implement it on myself, because I'm never going to have it all sorted. And I know that. But yeah, the go is so important, and I've got to work on the go. That's what I'm looking at now.
But it's always a work in progress, isn't it?
Yes.
Go is always going to be a work in progress. And some days it's easier than others. That's called life.
Yep.
Yeah, I love it. So Lauren, obviously I'll put all your contact details in the show notes. Is there anywhere particularly though people should go if they want to know a little bit more about what you're doing, or it is that they've got a group that they think some of your work would help? Where would you direct them straight away?
Well, I'm very good with messaging back if you want to contact me on any platform like LinkedIn, Lauren Munday on LinkedIn, or Think Set Go on Instagram or Facebook. But my website probably is the best way to get a bigger picture, and you can email me there as well. So www.thinksetgo.com.au, and info@thinksetgo.com.au is my email.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And I'll put all those details in the show notes. Seriously, this is one, and there's so many other things we didn't even get time to touch on right now, because, oh, wow, some of your hobbies outside of your work are just phenomenal. But you are practicing what you preach. You're out there giving it a go, and you realize that if you get the mindset piece right, set yourself up and go and just do it, that's where the magic happens. So, Lauren, thank you for being a guest, your first podcast episode. And I look forward to one day listening to your podcast episode when it's up and out there in the world. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kim. Good luck, everybody. Go for it.
Yay.